did a blog last week about Drive, the new film by Nick Winding Refn, for which he won the Best Director Award at Cannes. I've been a fan of his work for a long time, but I really like Drive, as apparently does everybody else. Many of you have written into the blog saying that you think it's pretty much going to be one of your top 5 films of the year. In the blog, I said, tell me what you think are the great movies, the sort of existential films about driving. Not films with great driving sequences in them, but films about that very cinematic idea of the loneliness of the driver. And you've sent me loads and loads of responses, some of them very good, some of them a little bit baffling. Here are just a few. This is from some guy called Lime. My favourite driving movie is Vanishing Point, which I mentioned in the blog. There's no real story, the main protagonist is nameless, has no backstory, character motivation is left blank. It's left to the supporting cast to flesh out the film, yet the film holds together well. It feels like a Terrence Malick film in its dreaminess. I agree with all of that, and there's no higher praise than saying something feels like a Terrence Malick film, unless you're talking about that Pocahontas tree-hugging movie. This from Al the Archivist. What about the often overlooked early Spielberg film Duel? There's a lot of great driving in that. Well, yes, there is, Al. But I would say that that's an example of a film which isn't about the existential loneliness of driving. In fact, Duel is really a monster movie that just happens to have cars and trucks in it. As I'm sure you know, when the truck rears off the cliff at the end, the sound you hear is the sound of Godzilla. I'd say that's a monster film with driving in, as opposed to a film about driving. Now, another film which came up quite a lot was Collateral. This from Chris Q. Collateral by Michael Mann is really good, features driving extensively. After all, the main character is a taxi driver, moving an assassin around from hit to hit. That said, is it really about driving? Well, no, Chris, again, I don't think it is. I think you've touched on it exactly. It's got a lot of driving in it, and it has a character who you might compare to Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, but actually it's a very, very different film. I think it's not about driving, nor indeed is Walkabout, which somebody suggested, but is, let's be honest, a film about walking. Pale Rider, somebody else suggested, which is a film about riding. And of course, Sunshine, the strangest of all the suggestions, which the last time I looked was a film about outer space. Back on track, this from Ian Schultz. Two Lane Blacktop is a road movie. It's about the road and was shot on the road. My two favourites are Vanishing Point and Two Lane Blacktop. Both are just wonderful existential 70s flicks, and those examples turned up several times. This from Jeff Dent. Two films that come to my mind are The Wages of Fear and Friedkin's remake Sorcerer. Obviously, they're both about much more than driving, but most of the film concerns the need to drive carefully and the loneliness involved. Now, actually, Jeff, I think this is a very interesting point. See, Wages of Fear is one of those things you think, actually, it's not about that, is it? It's about the explosives. But I think you're right in that it is essentially a driving movie, but more so in the Friedkin remake. See, everyone remembers the French Connection for its incredible car chase sequence, but Sorcerer is an extraordinarily grueling remake of Clouseau's film. I don't know that it's as good as Clouseau's film. In fact, Friedkin himself said that he thought that he had fallen down a little bit with that movie. But in terms of a grueling, lonely, nihilistic, completely bleak experience, Sorcerer is up there with the best. It is, as one critic said, a film that begins at a point of no hope and goes downhill from there. I think it's an existential driving movie. I think it's a great choice. Another very interesting example that came up a few times, this from Joseph McDonough. David Lynch's Straight Story is the one that comes to mind first. A man on his own travelling across America on a motorised lawnmower to reconcile with his brother after years of bad blood between them. I think that film sums up what you're asking nicely. The only thing I'd say counter to that is that Straight Story is about the people that he meets en route to reconcile his family business. And you could arguably say that the essence of an existential driving movie is that you're not really connecting with people. The central character at the heart of Straight Story does meet and connect with people because, as David Cox famously said, it is in the end Forrest Gump on a tractor. Just a few other examples here from Neon Man Crash, the David Cronenberg Crash, not the other one. Although it doesn't really make any comments about the loneliness of being one soul in a car and the feeling of detachment for everyone else, rather two people finding connection in one car, or two cars that have crashed into each other and finding a physical and psychological connection to the modern machines we've ended up becoming so attached to. Classic Cronenberg. I think that's a very well-made point. I'd also say that the text which is important at the back of Crash is Fast Company, in which David Cronenberg did make a previous film about cars, in which he said that actually all he learned from Fast Company was how to shoot surfaces. Well, if Crash is not a film about surfaces, about isolation, about everything being a surface sheen, then I don't know what is. This from Beggar, Borrower, Thief. The best driving film has to be Senna, the man whose life was defined by his phenomenal driving ability, his complete lack of fear, and a charisma that he managed to put across from inside a car whilst wearing a helmet. If you haven't seen Senna yet, you need to see it as soon as possible. It really is a total treat. Finally, this from Crebo, and thanks for mentioning this, Radio On. the best British road movie. Thank you very much for reminding me of Radio 1, a terrific little movie. Late 70s, I think 1980 it was made, black and white, semi-punk soundtrack. Reckless Eric is in there on a jukebox. Sting by the side of the road, heaven forbid. But one of those movies that often gets overlooked, but it's a real British gem. You know, in an American road movie, people get into cars, they drive for hours, for days, hundreds, thousands of miles. British road movie, get in the car in London, get to Bristol. And yet there's something about that film that really does have the Wim Wenders sense of the man, the road, the vehicle about it. It's a terrific and perhaps too little seen film, and thank you for reminding me of it. And if this blog has done anything at all, it's to put a smile on my face for remembering the joy that is Chris Pettit's Radio 1. Thank you.